You came here trying to figure out whether DIY spray foam was really worth it.
This Tyvek suit gets ridiculously hot.
You've been told by a number of people that spray foam, having it done by professionals, is probably the way to go. The money you're going to save with these kits is so minimal, you may as well hire a professional. Don't even mess with it. Well, I'm going to try to answer that, try to refute that today, because I did a ton of research before I bought these kits, and it felt like I never really got a satisfactory answer as to whether it was really a good idea to do this myself. And so I decided that when I finally do this, I really want to make a good quality and somewhat unedited video of the process of using this stuff. Well, unfortunately, the unedited part isn't going to work out because I recorded a bunch of this video with a dead mic. But otherwise, I am going to try to give you guys just a pretty solid, unbiased view of what it's like applying this stuff. The process of getting this set up is quite simple, and the instructions are very detailed, so I don't anticipate any problems there. They do ask you to keep these cans in the box, so there's these little holes in the box that you'll want to take the hose through and then just thread it to the tank after you have it in through there. And that's, I don't know, just similar to what I guess a propane tank would be. In the bag with the nozzles, you'll have a little wrench that you're going to use to tighten it up, and this little yellow tag you see here just gives you the little details about kind of how tight to turn that thread there. So you want to close up the box, and before you do that, remember to turn the tank on, and at that point you are ready to kind of get dressed up, because you definitely want to protect yourself. There's a lot of dripping, a lot of just mess, really, that happens with this. So wear your gloves, wear your proper protection. They will ask you to just spray out the first, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds or so. You want to pull the trigger and just spray out the first little bit until it looks like it's flowing evenly from both sides. At this point, you're ready for your tip, and there's a few different tips. One is like a fan tip and one more of a stream. And once you've got that tip on, you're pretty much ready to go. And I will, at this point, just show you the process of applying this stuff. You'll notice that I'm spraying over top a foam board, and that is a 1/2-inch foam board that I got for a pretty good price, and I basically just decided to put that in there to save myself some money. I had some comments from other people saying that that's not the greatest idea and that your spray foam should go directly against the roof deck, and so do your research before you do this, but it was certainly a little bit of a cost saving, because this spray foam, while doing it yourself is cheaper than hiring someone, is still pretty expensive. If you're wondering why there's already a whole bunch of this done or has a thin layer on it, it's because this is actually my second kit. So I did have one kit worth of practice before this.
This stuff is so satisfying.
Something to keep in mind here as we move to the other side of the room is that these tips will clog up if you stop spraying for at least 30 seconds or longer. So when you're doing your setup, just make sure you put your tanks in the most optimal place. Maybe check your hose to make sure it'll reach to the farthest corner of the room to where you'll get the most reach out of it. If it does happen to clog up, they've got a good number of tips included here where you can just swap them out, but still something to be aware of just so that you don't run yourself out of tips. You'll notice this area I'm getting into right now has a slightly different texture. This is obviously a second coat I'm going for right now, but the reason for the texture difference is that I used a different kind of foam. If you've ever heard of the 2-component in 1 can type of foam, it comes in a much more DIY friendly form. And I will link a video that I made showing the process, and my review of using that foam will be linked here. As I work my way across the room this way, I am on my second coat on all of this area, and what we're trying for is about 1-inch coats at a time, and that's going to take some trial and error. It's a little bit hard to get that 1 inch when you're spraying this stuff, but don't worry, it doesn't have to be exactly 1 inch as long as we're shooting for that, and you'll kind of get the feel for it as you move along. As I said before, you want to try to minimize the amount of times you have to move these around, just because if it takes you longer than 30 seconds to do that, it's going to clog up your tip, and then you're going to have to keep getting new tips. Or if you can do that in less than 30 seconds, that's great as well. Maybe if you're doing a real big area, it'd be helpful to have a second person to help you move these around.
Well, I'm basically trying to make sure everything gets a good first coat, first of all.
While I was calling that a first coat, it really was a second coat in the areas that I just did. It was that spray foam that I told you about earlier that came in the cans that I really just wasn't satisfied. It was skimpy. And so what I was really doing is just kind of gone over that coat to make sure everything is good before I come back over everything again and give it all a second coat. This was obviously a very challenging part of the job, getting in there behind that knee wall. All I could do was crawl around on my hands and knees. And if you've ever worn a Tyvek suit, you'll know that they do get extremely hot. If you have the option of doing this job in the winter or when it's cooler out, that would definitely give you an advantage.
Take a little break, let my nozzle jam up, and just grab another nozzle before I finish. Whew. This Tyvek suit is so hot. I grab another pair of gloves.
This stuff does set up amazingly quick. This here was probably about 15 minutes, and I was poking around a little bit just to see what it feels like. And at that point, I think I would have been fine putting on a second coat over that. But they do tell you to wait at least 30 minutes before going over your first coat.
All right. I'm changing tips. Going back over to the other side here. And keep rolling.
You may have noticed all the little drips all over the floor. This is an unfinished OSB floor, so it really wasn't a big deal. But in hindsight, I probably would have put plastic over the floor, since I did have to come back and scrape all this up with a putty knife later on. The The rest of this is basically more of what I've already shown you, just a lot of spraying and moving around. Since this was my first time using spray foam, I spent a lot of the final steps bouncing around the room, touching up areas here and there to make sure I didn't miss anything important. And I'll just fast forward through these final steps so you can still see the process without sitting through all those repetitive details. But as I wrap up this project, let's talk a little bit about the numbers. I spent about $1,500 on 2 spray foam kits, plus the cost of half-inch foam board, which I used against the roof deck to save some money. Altogether, the project cost me around $2,000. Hiring a professional, on the other hand, would have been at least $5,000, so the savings are significant. But even apart from the cost savings, I'd strongly recommend tackling this type of job yourself if you're up for it. There's something incredibly satisfying about taking on a project like this and seeing it all come together with your own 2 hands. So that's it for this video. I hope you found this helpful if you're considering taking on a spray foam insulation project of your own. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.